guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Kenesha Williams of Kenesha's Dope, and this is my Authortube. Today's video is a recap of a panel I was on at BlerDCon in Washington, D.C. in July. The topic of the panel is Black Fantasy. Is this a telling of what's to come? So we have some questions from the audience and some answers from the panel, and I hope you enjoy this video.
We just finished Pride Month, and there was a discussion centered around the fact that a lot of corporate entities were just using the flag for financial gain. And then I'm also sort of got an ear to this conversation about Black Ariel and the idea that we're sort of taking these characters that have been traditionally white characters, even though they're fictional characters, and creating and making them Black. And I like to create the parallel and have a discussion about, do you think that even while it's a great thing to see a Black Ariel, and I love it myself, do you think that both could be true? That they could be profiting without really, this sort of blackwashing in a way that's profitable?
I definitely think so. I think that's always their first step. Their first step is money. And so they're going to go with an easily identifiable property like The Little Mermaid, and then they're going to give us our Black Ariel. But I also think it's an opportunity for independent creators, because if you have a Black Mermaid anything right now, or you're a fast writer, put it out now, because you can ride that wave, because usually a movie takes about a year for it to actually hit the screens.
Right.
So if you can hit that, or you've already got something in your back pocket, then you can ride that zeitgeist that they are, they may be pimping us a little bit, but we can come in on the back end and make our own money off of that. And then the thing is that, like you were saying, I think you were alluding to, is that we have Black mermaids in our own mythology. We have Mami Wata. So if we take our own history, it's a shared history since we have a wide diaspora of what Blackness is, and if we can use that and ride some of the commercial mainstream waves, I think that's the way you can do it. And then your property might be competing with Disney. I mean, I'm sure, everybody knows Disney, but if you can put your stuff out, and if we see everyone who came here to BlerDCon, and if they all are like, hey, I don't want to wait a year for a Black Mermaid, and I want a Black Mermaid written by a Black author, then you're in there.
So what is your take on that? Do you feel like...
Yeah, look at the poster here. I don't know if you guys can see this. It's really small, right? But you can see it's a meme, right? And it's got Hush Money, Star Wars, Black Stormtrooper. You guys see that? Yeah. So that basically says it all. So rather than spend the time and money to fully develop true Black mediums, true Black screenplays, animes. I've seen quite a few of them out there, and sadly most of them are never going to see the light of day. It's easier to pie us off, placate us by putting us in a meaningless role in a fantasy that already exists, right? Or in a series that already exists. They'll give us Samuel Jackson as a Jedi, in Star Wars, or they'll give us this Black Stormtrooper, I forget his name. Finn. Okay, now I remember it. Finn in the
selective memory.
Yeah. In the current Star Wars series, right? But they won't take the time and the effort to develop something that is truly Afrocentric in nature, like my man Senpai was talking about. It's just easier. It's easy. The scripts are already there. The money's already there. Right?
For those who have just joined us, I was asking them to sort of examine it. We were trying to examine the parallel between, since we're just coming off of Pride Month, we were discussing how some of the participants were saying that there's a real money grab recently with corporate entities using the rainbow flag. It's just a way to get people in the door, and maybe their ethics and their principles on the daily don't really reflect their allyship with LGBTQ. And I was asking if similarly they noticed that we're blackwashing some characters that were traditionally white for that purpose, for just for if it's done for profit and not necessarily to celebrate. And I argue that it can be both. And I'll give you a bad example. So with the Black Mermaid thing, let's stay off the Little Mermaid. Let's scale back to Siren. I was really excited for Siren because I kept seeing memes of this badass, fierce mermaid. And then the first season, I'm just like, oh, so the first time we encounter her, she's banging on a cage, and then her white counterpart is out partying and sort of in a subversive way, sort of integrating into trying to be, acceptable into the neighborhood and community. And I was just like, well, damn, if this ain't just a real smack in the head. So I really couldn't finish watching it, but that's a prime example where, boom, we're gonna get a poster, boom, we're gonna get a meme, we're gonna get these great Tumblr, oh, Black Mermaid, yes. And then when I go to dissect the story, I'm just like, this character is not really a service to anyone. I don't know if it's necessarily useful inclusivity.
Here I go.
That was like got everyone in a tizzy is, first of all, they did like the movie stills and showed him and it looked like horrible. You know what I mean? Like the pictures looked horrible. And I'm thinking, what other actor has the singing comedy?
I don't know that anyone had that kind of whimsy.
He has the singing? I don't know.
Oh, well, his singing wasn't great, but
it's just, it's something. It's your whatever your taste is. But I cringed when I saw it.
I'm gonna cape for Will.
Yeah.
I'm gonna cape for Will and say that he had the level of whimsy and sort of wholesomeness that I can't imagine another person, another male of color playing. I have this kind of scrape hard. He sort of, I'm like, because he doesn't take himself too seriously, to me this was actually a role that I could see him in.
I could see Terry Crews doing it now.
Terry Crews?
Yeah. I can see him doing it.
Well, yeah, definitely for the look. There's nothing else.
So quick break, did we all see Terry Crews vying for the role of Sebastian,
He wants
right?
to be Sebastian.
Did you see him on his Instagram vying for the role of Sebastian?
He will be King Triton.
King Triton, yeah, oh my goodness, sorry. It was hilarious.
Yeah.
You in the back? So, I'll let you go first.
I was going to say, whenever someone says that, that's a cop-out. Because we have had hundreds of white characters, and why did they have to be white? Why did they have to be? Well, because you wanted them to be, because you guys feel like you're the dominant majority. So I think like when you have a series like that, and I don't know who the writer is, because what I'm thinking of...
Definitely going to look it up.
Yeah, what I'm thinking of right now is, I think it's Marvel has a new character named Naomi.
No, it's DC.
DC, okay, good. Okay, well, DC is doing good work then. Okay,
He's trying to play catch up right now.
Yeah, so the writer of that he's a black male. So, I mean, it's not a black woman, so there may be some nuances he misses, but it is a black author penning that story. And to me, if you want to do it right, I think that that's a good first step, especially because we haven't had as many opportunities in the past to write our own stories. Right now, hashtag own voices is a big thing, especially in like YA literature, is actually getting people that live those experiences to write those type of characters. So I think that when a company takes that into consideration, then to me it's a little bit more than a cash grab, because they don't have to. They can get their DC, they can go hire whoever they want. So I think if they're doing the actual work to make it realistic to what a black character or person actually goes through, even if they are a fantasy character. I mean, there are just certain nuances that sometimes you can read a story and you're like, that doesn't sound right. And then you're like, and then you go look up the author and you're like, that's why it doesn't sound right. And it could be something as
like
small as
Chef. Like, who's writing this?
Like, it could be as simple as she jumped out of the shower and threw her hair in a ponytail.
Y'all know how watch they do.
And I've been natural, I've been relaxed, I've been braided, I've never hopped out the shower and just pulled it in a ponytail. So I'm like, no, they're missing some steps there. So I know that this was not a black woman that wrote this, or, and those nuances people might not think they matter in certain instances, but they lend a credibility to the story that take you deeper into the story. Even if it is a fantasy story, it takes you deeper when you feel like that person kind of has some insider knowledge.
Well,
we got two. Wakanda first.
That kind of takes me, what you just said, takes me back to your beginning question about what is black fantasy. And black fantasy takes into account those things, like those little things that may not mean anything to another writer or a writer who's not of color, but to us, like that really resonates with us, and we can connect to it, and it makes sense to us. Thinking about N.K. Jemison's her Broken Earth books. So many. I mean, there's so much in there that's not really pushing the story forward per se, but I identify with it. I'm like, she talks about some of her characters' hair. And I used to have locks, so some of the things she was saying, I was like, oh yeah, like I could relate to that and I can understand that.
But to answer your question, you know what, you go first.
No.
So when you're having those arguments, I mean, to me, when someone says those things to me, I'm taken aback, because here you have a character that is sort of, DC tiptoeing into this, into these waters, and they're just immediately met with such blowback. And these conversations always just blow me away, because I was there, little black girl reading stories that were just homogenous my whole life. And I don't think I ever even bothered to question it until I went to college, until someone sort of opened my eyes. It was just something that I internalized. And so I think that when you get arguments like that, understand that whoever is pushing that argument towards you is experiencing a disruption, a little crack in their safety, in their foundation, and it's unwarranted to think that one black heroine, in a slew of this long tradition of white characters could trash a whole brand. I think that's their problem.
Yes.
The answer kind of came to the story told in the Afrocentric universe. And I'm wondering what you guys think about having just black stories told in an existing fantasy.
Yes.
And existing IP, or like I said, like my jam is urban fantasy. So urban fantasy doesn't necessarily tend to rely on an Afrocentric background. So some of the monsters that you're battling are like werewolves and vampires and stuff like that. So if you're talking about like that, like original IP, but not using like an Afrocentric background, that's kind of my jam, because like I think that we need black werewolf stories. We need black vampire stories. We need all these stories that we've grown up with too, because we are kind of like the poem, What is Africa to Me? It says I'm twice removed. So you are both black and American, and you've grown up in like this American culture, and you want to see yourself in American culture too, because we've been here long enough that we should see ourselves in the American culture. So I think that's very valuable. I like sprinkling it with some of our diaspora traditions, some things that are passed down. Like a lot of my family is from like southern rural Virginia, so they have like their own like traditions and things like that. So like I like things peppered with that, because like I said, it kind of lends reality to the fantasy. If someone's eating grits for breakfast, you know what I mean? Like
right.
that's going to show something a little different.
To further answer your question, so he gave us his what black fantasy is to him, but do know that there are academic schools of thought and writings around these things, and so just as most literary umbrellas have subgenres, so too does Afrofuturism and fantasy. So you can, fantasy can be little. Like The Little was like the remake of Big with Regina King, I believe, and when she she says some words and she turns back into a little girl, that's fantasy. So it can be modern, it can be, there's, what is it called? Sword and Soul is a subgenre, cyberpunk is a subgenre. There's a bunch of subgenres, so it can mean, honestly, whatever you want it to mean to you. I mean, See You Yesterday to me is arguably black sci-fi / black fantasy, and that's set straight up in an urban setting, and it's pushing into like more modern storytelling. So I think it's what the beauty of it is, it's evolving as we're writing it, and we don't have to be pigeonholed into telling the same type of epics. We don't. It's beautiful that we can celebrate the African pantheon and talk about Orishas, but that we don't even have to define it as narrowly as that. It can be, it could be black version of Powerpuff Girls in space, on a spaceship, led by black goblins. Because whatever you want it to be, because there are no boundaries to fantasy. And I think that's also why it took us collectively as black writers a while to tiptoe into it. Because imagine growing up and every fictional epic saga you see is somehow related to you being a slave. So much so that everyone around you, I mean, the literary world who's reading your works is like, wow, these people sort of stuck in the past. Maybe they can't write in the future. And that's actually what my motivation was to write in the Onyx Crown, was what you talked about. Was, I got tired of seeing, when you go past the 1700s for black history, it's all about slavery and nothing else. And medieval history for whites means an entirely different thing than for blacks. And so, we weren't taught about Kush and Axum and, all of our glorious medieval kingdoms, Persia and Egypt. Black is a pretty recent term also. I mean, we were
True.
Moors, and we were
Very true.
Categorized
Exactly.
in many different things. Black is pretty recent.
Exactly,
term.
but and I love Game of Thrones, but if you watch Game of Thrones, it's like an episode of Survivor, where basically, you're waiting for the last black person to be voted off, and in the end, I think there was one main black character standing, but until that part, most of them were slaves that had been liberated by Daenerys. Or a smuggler.
I'll take this moment. To say that.
Yeah.
I'll take this moment to say that the power of writing in black fantasy and controlling our own narratives in it is that we can go and dissect it and maybe create something that wasn't there before. And I'll give you a perfect example, and I know you know this work. David Croson, who is one of our favorite colleagues, he wrote a comic book called Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer, where he's just like, what if she was more than just an underground railroad, advocate for abolition of slavery? What if she was also Harriet Tubman Demon Slayer?
The idea of the future is kind of like what Imshai was alluding to, is that we don't have to be bound by like these strict genre rules, because we didn't create them in the first place. So we can break them. I also feel like the fact that our collective history is so, the depth and breadth of it is so, it's just so wide and it's so deep. Like he was saying about, if you go back and do like the medieval type fantasies, the fact that we can talk about like having, like a Blade type character that's, that's a vampire, the demon slayer, all of those type of things. I think we can do so much and incorporate, our history and what we feel like our present and our future is going to be. Like, I think that's what's really exciting, is really being able to write yourself into the future, because I think that's like been I'm about to get woo-woo here. I think it's been like a psychic block on people when you don't see yourself in the present and you don't see yourself in the future. I think it like dampens your spirit. So I think the fact that we're able to write ourselves into the present and write ourselves into the future is very uplifting on like a level that we don't even know yet. Because I mean, they talk about, now I'm gonna get sci-fi, they talk about, in our genes that trauma is in your DNA. They studied people in the Holocaust, they studied, so like, I think we're kind of healing ourselves through our writing and our creation, and that's my woo-woo. everyone. So if you go to KeneshaWilliams.com/free, I have a list of, I don't know, let's say 50, I didn't count. I have a list of 50 fantasy books by Black authors. I have some Milton Davis. They're not all free to download, but it's a free resource because I know a lot of times people, like we were talking about before, they know a lot of the commercial authors.
Yeah.
They know the big names. I'll spell it out in a second. So they know the big names, but they don't know a lot of the independent authors that are looking for you guys as their customers. So I have a list. I have it broken down by urban fantasy and like magical realism, and then like sword and soul, medieval, like high fantasy, and then I also have some graphic novels listed for you guys. So KENESHA Williams.com/.